Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Once again we meet. I hope everybody is well. We make dua, Allah Ta'ala blesses you all, blesses your families, and grants you beneficial knowledge, grants you the best of this world and hereafter, grants you protection from all evil. So we are now moving forward, and we're going to continue with the remaining sunnahs, the practices of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam regarding wudu when it comes to ablution. We're going to finish them off today. After that, we will be going through the method. I will mention the method of the full method of wudu in order in a systematic way, and I will mention that in the summary video, inshallah. Anyway, in the detailed videos we'll be going through next the etiquettes, the adab of wudu, which are the mustahab acts of wudu, the preferable acts of wudu, which would make a wudu even more complete. And there are some scholars who have mentioned 4, some have mentioned 5, and Imam al-Shurumbulali here has listed 8 mustahabbat, the preferable actions of wudu here. So we'll be going through them in this session, and we will also be doing the disliked actions of wudu, the makruhat in wudu. So what would be disliked if a person did during the wudu? We'll be going through that, and then we will move on to the legal reasons for a person to perform the wudu, meaning why would a person perform wudu, why would a person do their wudu. We'll be going through that ruling, and then we will be doing the conditions of being legally responsible. When is a person's wudu counted if they were to do so? And then we will end on, lastly, the conditions of the validity of wudu. So in which conditions is wudu valid? So we'll be going through these things for this particular session. Moving on, we were talking about the sunnahs of wudu. So we're on number 12, on page number 43, I believe it is. Yes. So number 12 is wiping the entire head once and the ears with the same water. So you take after you've washed the arms, so you washed your face, you washed the arms, then you would wash the entire head. So the way you wash the entire head, you wet your hands. Once your hands are wet, you join your fingers together and you just take it back all the way, washing your entire head. So take the whole hand and cover the whole entire head, and that would be wiping the entire head. Some people have mentioned a preferred method, which is indicated through some ahadith, though it's not mentioned in the books of our fiqh. But some people have mentioned that you take, half of your hand. So you take these 3 fingers and half of your palm, and you wipe the middle part of your head, and keep your palm away from the sides. Keep them away and just put them all the way down, all the way to the back. And then now when you get to the back, you place your palm down and the other 2 fingers that you didn't use, and you bring it all the way back. So you keep your 2 fingers, the 2 index fingers together, and you keep your thumbs like this. So it's coming backwards, it's coming back, and it's coming all the way down here like this. So hopefully people can see what I'm doing. So you're wiping all the way. I'm doing a little bit more extra. I'm coming onto the face. You can see, but just so that you can see what I am doing, okay? You don't come all the way up to the face. You have to cover the head. So you go back and forward. And that's what some people have mentioned, that you do the back, and then you do the sides coming back front. Because there's an indication from a hadith that mentions that Prophet ﷺ, he would go back and come forward. But nevertheless, the books of fiqh have simply mentioned wiping the whole head, and just take the hand all the way to the back is enough as well. So this is a sunnah to wipe the entire head, and then use that same hand that is still wet, use that same hand to wipe the ears as well. So you put your finger into your ears, going round the folds, following the folds all the way around. Once you've finished the front part of the ear, the outer part of the ear, you go with your thumb to the back, you rub the back part of the ear, and so that the whole ear is covered. So that's wiping over the ear too, and this is called masah of the ear, and this is part of the sunnah. So that's number 12. Number 13 will be rubbing, meaning the limbs when washed. So when you're washing your face, you're not just splashing water on it, because that's not something to do. You actually rub on the face. Likewise, when you're washing the arm, you don't just put your arm under the tap and let it just pour the water. You actually rub. You rub with the other hand like this, and you rub. And likewise when you're washing the feet. So the limbs that are to be washed, rubbing whilst washing them. Then number 14 is starting with the right limb. So you start with when you're washing your two arms, so you start by washing the right one first. You wash this 3 times, all of them. You wash all of it 3 times, and then once you washed it 3 times, then you wash the left arm, and you wash the left arm 3 times. Likewise, when you're washing the feet, you wash the first thing you do is wash the right foot first, all 3 times, and then you wash the left one. So to doing this, starting with the right is the sunnah. Number 15 is starting with the tips of the fingers and toes when washing the arms and feet. So when you're washing your arms and your feet, you start from you start from the toes, or when you're washing the arms, you start with the tip of these fingers and you work your way up to the elbows, not the other way around. You don't start from the elbow and come down. Okay, the sunnah is to do it this way around, and that's what he's talking about here. And number 16 is starting with the front of the head when wiping it. So when you're wiping the head, you start from the front and you work your way back, rather than starting from the back and coming forward. So when you're starting, that's what you would do. And lastly, number 17, his mention is wiping the back of the neck, but not the throat. So wiping the nape, as we would call it, and you do that with the back of your hand. So the back of your hand, you use that to wipe the nape. So when you merge all of this together, this will form the method of doing wudu. Now we are moving on to the etiquettes of the adab of wudu. So amongst the etiquettes, the adab of wudu are following. So the things that are recommended to do, the mustahabbat as we will call them, the things that are preferred to do. So number 1 is facing the qibla, facing the direction of the Kaaba where we pray salat towards. So when you're making wudu, try to face towards that direction. If you can't, you can't, but this is a preferable action. Number 2, avoiding the water used in wudu, meaning the water that is being used and falling off your limbs. So when you're washing your face, the water that's going to be falling off your face, you want to make sure that this doesn't fall back onto your body, doesn't fall onto your clothes. It's not impure water. It's not water that's impure. It's still clean. It's still pure water, but it's best to avoid this falling back onto yourself. Likewise, when you're washing your arms, the water that's going to fall off from the elbow, you want to make sure that this doesn't fall back onto you or onto your body or your clothes. Number 3 is making supplication, dua, with those words that have been narrated. So you've got du'as that have been mentioned from the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Oh Allah, make us from amongst the ones who are repenting a lot, often repenting, and from those who like to stay pure. These are du'as. There's other du'as I'm sure you can learn. You can type on the net. You can see du'as for wudu, and there are many du'as. There are also du'as that our pious predecessors would read. They're not directly from sunnah, but they are from connected to each limb. And these types of du'as that are recited when a person is washing that particular limb, allows the person to concentrate during wudu, think of Allah, think of the ibadah that they're going to do. And by the way, if a person is making these du'as, reciting even Bismillah, we talked about at the beginning of wudu, in the bathroom area where the toilet might be there, this is fine as long as the toilet pan the actual toilet is, the lid is closed, or if the impurities are flushed away. So if the lid is not closed, there's no lid in fact, and but the impurities have all been flushed away. There are no physical or viewable impurities that a person can see. Then it's absolutely no problem in that room, you can call it a bathroom, to say the name of Allah, to say Bismillah. It's no problem. A person can do this. But if there are physical impurities that can be seen, it's not flushed away, or the lid is not closed, and there's nothing you can do about it, then you would not say the name of Allah. Or there is impurities other places, that's on the floor or wherever else they are, then a person would not say the name of Allah, would not recite the du'as aloud. They would recite it in their heart. You would recite it inside your mind, in your thoughts. So that's what a person should do. So making these du'as, there are many. Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwab. I already recited this one, but you can read Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatika. Oh Allah, assist me in making your dhikr, in remembering you, and in upon reciting reciting the Quran, and also giving thanks to you, shukrika, and also doing good worship of yourself, husni ibadatik. So these are things that we should think, oh Allah, Allahumma bayyid wajhi yawma tabyaddu wujuh wa taswaddu wujuh. Allah, brighten my face on the day of judgment, the day when faces will be darkened, when the faces will be bright as well. Brighten my face in that time. Oh Allah, when you're washing your nose, for example, Allahumma rihni ra'ihat al-jannah wa la turihni ra'ihat al-nar. Allah, give me the ability to smell the fragrance of Jannah. Don't make me smell the repugnant smells of the hellfire. Don't make me go anywhere near that. So these are all, you can understand now how to make dua when you're wiping your head. It's quite easy to understand. You want the shade under the throne of Allah Ta'ala. Allahumma adhillini tahta dhilla arshik yawma la dhilla illa dhilla arshuk. When you're wiping your hands, you could be saying, Allahumma a'tini kitabi bi yamini. Allah, grant me my book of deeds in my right hand. And when you're washing the left hand, saying that, don't give me the book of deeds in my left hand or from behind my back. So these are all du'as a person can recite. When you're washing your feet, Allahumma thabbit qadamay ala sirat. Allah, make my feet be steadfast on the pul sirat, on the bridge of sirat, on the day of judgment. So these are du'as a person can recite in English, even if a person doesn't know the Arabic, and inshallah better their wudu. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So moving on. So a person, number 4, one from the mustahabbat, the preferable actions to do during wudu, is mentioning the name of Allah when washing each limb. So each limb saying some sort of name of Allah, remembering Allah Ta'ala, like I mentioned in the previous one as well, making dua. So this will be falling under this, washing each limb. When washing each limb, saying Allah, saying Subhanallah, say Alhamdulillah, say different things if you don't know the du'as that I mentioned earlier. Number 5, performing wudu by oneself. So not with the aid and assistance of anybody else. That's if a person does not require this. So if a person does require, meaning is so ill that they need somebody to help them to make wudu, then that's fine. That you need somebody to pour water for you and things like this, so then that's fine. But if a person does not require anybody, there's no need, then it's preferable for a person to make wudu on their own. Number 6 is rushing to perform wudu before the prayer time comes in, unless one has a chronic excuse. So meaning perform the wudu before the prayer time, so that when the prayer time comes in, you've got an opportunity to pray your sunnahs or anything else. You've got the opportunity to pray straight away. So this is something that a person should take care of. Nowadays, obviously, if a person is performing, like for the males especially, if you're performing the salat, with the jama'ah, then trying to make sure that a person has made wudu well in advance, so that you don't have to get to the masjid and the salat has already started, and then you're making wudu and missing raka'at, missing the parts of the prayer. So you don't want to do that. That's why performing the wudu before the prayer time comes in generally, as a state of constant purity, a person should stay in a state of wudu anyway. It makes praying much more easier, especially when you're out and about. The only time it says that unless the person has a chronic excuse, meaning if a person has, which later on we will talk about, if a person has a state of ma'dhur, meaning excuse, that the person is constantly in a has an excuse. So for example, a person has this problem of constantly bleeding, and the blood just doesn't stop, so then they come into the ruling of an excused person. For that person, they will have to make wudu after the prayer time has started. There's no point in that person making wudu before the prayer time has started. So this is details for this will come later on. Number 7, reciting the 2 testifications of faith after wudu, meaning the shahadatain, the shahadat ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. That's one, that you testify to Allah, that being none worthy of worship besides Allah, and the second testification of the Prophet ﷺ being the final messenger, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, that he is the servant of his and his messenger. So these reciting this, as some people may know it as the second kalima, as the testification of faith, reciting this at the end is a preferable action. Number 8, drinking from the leftover water after wudu. So this is if a person was making wudu from a utensil. So you've got a utensil that you've put water into, and then you're taking water from the utensil to wash the limbs of wudu. So if you're doing that and there's still some water left over in that utensil, drinking from that leftover water is a preferable action, because we learn from the hadith of Rasulullah that he would do this. It doesn't become a sunnah because he didn't do it often enough, but it is a preferable action because Prophet he did do it. So this is why these are all preferable actions whilst making wudu. Now we move on to the makruhat. Amongst the things disliked in wudu are the following. So the things that a person should not do would render the wudu that a person is doing, the act that the person is doing here, will render the person's wudu makruh, disliked, meaning that they've done a disliked action during their prayer. Now obviously disliked actions, it could be prohibitively disliked, a makruh tahrimi, which is close to haram, and would obviously mean that a person is sinful for doing this particular thing. But there are certain actions which are mildly disliked, which are makruh tanzihi, which are less in terms of their dislikeness. Now when it comes to makruh tahrimi, generally speaking, it refers to something which is wajib to abstain from, something which is mandatory to abstain from. A person does not abstain from that, hence the person becomes sinful if the person did this without an excuse, a valid excuse. The second type, which is makruh tanzihi, the mildly disliked thing, this would be when a person does not do an action which is optimal to do. A person it would be better for a person to do this, but they avoided doing this. So a person will not then generally won't be sinful for doing this particular action. It will be makruh tanzihi, will not generally lead to sin, even if a person did it without a valid excuse. So this is the two categories here that we talk about in terms of makruhat, things that are disliked. So wasting water, israf, number 1 is mentioning. So wasting water, using more water than needed. So just letting the tap run, and it is wasting water. This is considered to be israf. It is discouraged in the Quran as well, and from the ahadith of Rasulullah as well. Also, in amongst this is washing the limbs more than 3 times. So if a person washes the limbs 4 times, you're washing your face, you're washing it 4 times without an excuse, then this would also fall under israf. Or washing it more than 4 times, even washing it more than 3 times, anything more than 3 times would generally fall under israf. Number 2 is using too little water when washing. So a person goes completely the opposite way and uses too little water. So in essence, they end up just rubbing the water all over the limbs. They just a little bit of water and rubbing it all over their face, and they've just wet their face. In essence, they've just passed wet hands all over their face, but there's no actual droplets of water. What's important to understand here is the distinction between washing and wiping. So washing is where, according to fiqh, according to the understanding that the jurists have mentioned, is that from that limb, so if you're washing your face, from that limb there has to be at least 2 drops that fall off that limb. So if you're washing your arm, there has to be at least 2 drops that can fall off that limb. Then that could be called washing now. It's no longer wiping. But if 2 drops at least did not fall off that limb, then this is deemed to be wiping, masah, not washing, not ghusl. So this is important to understand the distinction between the two. So using too little water when washing, this will then be wiping, it won't be washing. So this is makruh to do when you're using too little water. Number 3 is striking or slapping the face with water when washing it. So when a person is washing their face, they are just smashing or splashing the water onto their face, and this is makruh. There's reasons as to why it's makruh. Obviously, it's not optimal to smash the face. Is amongst the etiquette, the adab that a person should maintain, tahrim and sanctity and such honor for the face, that it should not be thrown something towards like that. That's one reason. Other reasons is if people are making wudu besides you, on the side of you, then you're going to end up splashing water all over them. If nobody's washing besides you, then the least that will happen is that used water we talked about. Remember, we said avoid the used water coming back onto your clothing. When you splash, then the used water from the face will then splash back onto your clothing, and this will lead to dislike. So there's multiple reasons, layered reasons as to why this is disliked. Number 4 is speaking during wudu, other than making supplication. So speaking of anything, especially speaking of worldly things, this would be disliked. This will not be optimal. This would lead to karaha in a person's wudu. Besides the du'as that we talked about and supplications we talked about, a person should obviously be trying to do this. Number 5, lastly, is mentioned here, is having somebody else assist one in wudu without a valid excuse. So what this means is that having somebody washing your hands, your arms for you, washing your face for you, washing your feet for you, you're not doing anything. And that's what it means by having somebody else assist you. If somebody is assisting you by pouring the water for you, they're pouring and you're washing, then that's absolutely fine. There is no dislike to that whatsoever. Okay, likewise, if somebody fetched water for you, prepared the water for you, if you needed heating it, whatever, all of this is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it at all, because we know that Zayd ibn Thabit or other Sahaba radiallahu anhum would, and Sahabiyat, the wives of Prophet ﷺ, they would prepare the water for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do wudu with. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. A person can prepare that water for you. Moving on. So the next part mentions the legal reason for performing wudu is the desire to do that which is not permissible except in the state of wudu. Meaning the reason why a person would perform wudu is because there are certain things that you can only do those things in a state of wudu, in a state of this ritual purity, such as ritual prayer, salat. So salat can only be prayed in a state where a person is in a state of wudu. If a person does not have wudu, they are unable to perform the salat. Or touching a copy of the Quran. So if you want to touch a physical copy of the Quran, then again you will need to have wudu. Likewise, just to expound upon that, a lot of the scholars, in fact, are of the opinion that if you are using a virtual copy of the Quran on a tablet or on a phone or anything, then touching the actual screen where the letters are, where the Arabic letters are, touching that part of the screen is also wudu is necessary for. Some are a bit more strict and they say anywhere on the page, touching anywhere on the page is something that you would need wudu for. There are some scholars of a contrary opinion. They say that a virtual copy of the Quran on the phone or a tablet is not actually a mushaf, is not the Quran. Therefore, you can touch it without the state of wudu. But obviously, because there are differences of opinion, adopting caution here and making sure that you do have wudu and touching, especially the page or the letters specifically, the Arabic letters, would be something that I would definitely recommend everyone to do so. So, touching a copy of the Quran, this is another reason, a legal reason as to why a person would need to perform wudu, or the That's one set of things that's mentioned as to why a person would perform wudu. A second thing that he mentions here, which is a bit more of a complex idea, is or the legal reason would also be the divine command being directed to someone due to the near expiration of a prayer time. So if, for instance, let's just take an example and then explain it through the example. This will come later on, inshallah, anyway, but just to understand what he's talking about over here. So if there is a woman who is just coming off her menstrual cycle, so therefore the legal reason for her to perform the wudu now would be so that because the divine command is being directed to her because she has finished her state of menstruation. Her menstruation is over now, and she has now finished it towards the end of that time, right at the end of that prayer time. So right at the end of, for example, dhuhr time, she has just finished her menstruation. So what she will do, because the prayer time is near expiration of, it's expiring, so she will now perform wudu, though she will need to still perform her ghusl, but this is also a legal reason as to why a person, or another example, if a child who was immature has become mature, or if a non-Muslim became a Muslim, accepted Islam, again towards the end of the time, then because the divine command is being directed to that person to perform that salat now, so they accepted Islam when there was, for example, 5 minutes left for dhuhr, so the divine command is addressed towards them. So this is another reason, legal reason, as to why a person could perform wudu, because the divine command is being addressed towards them, though they need to still perform a ghusl, to which is going to come later, ritual bath, to actually now do the action to perform the salat, for example. But just because the divine command is being addressed to them, they can now perform wudu, though that's just a theoretic thing. Practically they can't really do anything with that wudu, meaning they can't perform salat with that wudu. Hopefully this is making sense. It's a more of a complex idea, but he's brought it about over here. Hopefully as we go along, this idea will open up for everybody. And then he goes on to say the conditions of being legally responsible to perform it are the following. So he's now expounding upon this, the divine command being addressed to the person. So what are the conditions for this address being, the divine command being addressed to that person? Is firstly, the person needs to be a Muslim, so they need to have Islam, the quality of Islam, so they need to be a Muslim. So then if they're Muslim, then we've ticked the box basically in order for the divine command being directed towards them. Likewise, they need to have puberty, they need to be mature beyond the age of puberty. Number 3 is they need to be sane, they need to be sanity. Number 4, termination of menstruation or postnatal bleeding, which is the nifas, the bleeding after after giving birth to a child, or the state of ritual impurity. So any ritual impurity, if a person is in a state of ritual impurity because, for example, because they've had a wet dream or something like that, then they would need to have a ritual bath to make them ritually pure. But in these states, the same thing which is expounding upon above, that in these states, if the person is towards near the expiry of the prayer time, they can still do wudu because the divine command is being directed to them, though they can't pray until they've done their ghusl. So hopefully this is making a bit more sense. Number 5 is access to and ability to use sufficient purifying water. So again, a little bit more complex one. So if a person gains access to sufficient purifying water, or if a person becomes able to use purifying water. So access to, for example, if you're on a journey, you don't have enough water, you only have water enough to drink, and you need that water for the rest of your journey. Or you don't have any water, so you don't have access to water. So you did the dry ablution, you did tayammum, which will come later on as well. So this is why it's a bit of a complex idea, because it's discussing things that are going to come later. But anyway, you did the dry ablution. Now you gain access to sufficient purifying water. So that's why you would need to make wudu with that water now. Likewise, if you are unable to use the water because of some sort of illness, and now you've become cured from that illness, and you are able to use water now. So that's what he's talking about, an ability to use sufficient purifying water. So this is also a requisite, a prerequisite, something that a person would need in order for for them to meet their legal responsibility. And number 6 is ability to perform the prayer, the salat. So the person needs to have the ability to perform the actual prayer. If they have no ability to pray the prayer, for example, they're completely paralyzed, so they have no ability to pray that prayer, fully paralyzed from head to toe. So therefore, they have no ability to perform the prayer. So then the performance of wudu will not be necessary upon that person. So the idea is that if a person is not a Muslim, there is no wudu on the person. If the person is not mature, there's no wudu. If the person is insane, there is no wudu. If the person is in the state of menstruation, postnatal bleeding, there is no wudu on the person. So all of these conditions need to apply. All 6 of these conditions that he's mentioned need to apply for legal responsibility to be upon the person. Now the person is legally responsible. Now the person can now perform wudu because they're legally responsible. So that's the concept he's making when he says the legal. So that's why the divine command being directed to the person due to the near expiration of the prayer time, that's what it means. He has concluded on this point now, just to explain what he is talking about over here. So hopefully this has made sense to everybody. We did say we'll go through the conditions of the validity of wudu, but I think we won't get through it in the time that we have left. So we'll just make sure that everybody has understood. I'm just going to explain this one more time. So when he says the divine command being directed to the person due to the near expiration of the prayer, all he's talking about is that when the prayer time is coming to the end, there's only a little bit of time left. During that time, the person will be addressed by the Sharia, will be addressed to perform that salat. And if that person is being addressed to perform that salat, that then means the person needs to be allowed to make wudu. So that's what it means, that the person is legally allowed to make that wudu. Okay, just to summarize now on everything that we have done on today's module. So we went through finishing off the sunan, the sunnah acts, the emphasized sunnah acts of wudu. We finished them off, and then we went through the adab, the etiquettes, those mustahab actions, preferable actions of wudu, and he mentioned 8 of them: facing qibla, avoiding the used water from splashing back onto the person, onto yourself, making the supplications, saying the name of Allah when washing each limb, performing wudu on by oneself, washing the parts continuously, and then reciting the 2 testimonies, the Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. There's a virtue for this, like the 8 doors of paradise open up for the person if a person does this at the end of wudu, as one hadith mentions. And lastly, drinking that leftover water, and some scholars have even mentioned drinking that water standing up. So these are the preferable actions that we talked about. Then we went through the makruhat, the disliked actions. So he mentioned altogether 5: wasting water, using too little water, slapping the water on the face, speaking of worldly affairs during the wudu, and having somebody else assist. And we talked about what the assistance meant. Then we went into when it is a legal reason as to why a person would perform wudu. So we talked about 2 main concepts there as to why a person would perform wudu in terms of legal concepts, and we ended on that. I did say we will quickly run through the full method of the wudu, but I think in the summary it may not be enough time. So I will go through the method, the full method, in next week's full session, inshallah. In one of the sessions, we'll go through the full method of the actual wudu, of how to perform the wudu, and in the full actual method, and we'll try to do which ones are sunnah, which ones are actually fard, and which ones are mustahab, which ones a person should avoid. Inshallah, we'll try to do that